Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. A lot of people have the goal to max out their retirement accounts. I know that that's a goal in our household and it's no easy feat. If you're looking at account types like the 401k, the 403b, the TSP, account types like that, their max out contribution limits are incredibly high. As of 2023, you can put away $22,500 into these accounts with an additional $7,500 in catch-up contributions for those 50 and over. And the annual contributions for these accounts are already slated to increase to $23,000 in 2004. There's no doubt about it. If you're able to max out these accounts, you're definitely a super saver. As I said, it's no easy feat to put away this amount into investments. But when does it typically happen? When is a person able to max out these accounts? Is there a certain age or is there a certain income that makes it more likely? When does this typically happen? Now, of course, we kind of have to use the word typical with a grain of salt here because the typical person is not maxing out these employer-sponsored retirement accounts. In fact, according to a Vanguard study, only about 12% of 401k participants actually max out their account in any given year. So basically, we want to look at what it takes to be in that group of people. I found a Reddit thread asking what age or what salary did you start maxing out your 401k account? One person said, "So last year was the first year maxing it out. 35 years old. Probably could have gotten there faster if I didn't have kids." That's probably a very accurate statement because kids are incredibly expensive. And then consider the fact that most people tend to have kids when they're in their late 20s or when they're in their early 30s. And at this phase of life, you're still pretty new to your career. So you're probably in that entry-level pay and that mid-level pay. So compound the starting pay and mid-pay with a very expensive dependent or dependents, and it's gonna be hard to max out these accounts. Now, this next person is definitely a super saver. I maxed mine my first full year working a professional job. I'm 41 and have 1.3 million in there now. This one truly illustrates the power of getting invested early and sticking with it. Because for someone to reach millionaire status with investable assets by the age of 40 or 41 is incredibly early. Still think of what that can turn into with compounding over the next several decades because likely they're not retiring for the next 20 years or so still. Consider that the average millionaire doesn't reach this millionaire threshold until around the age of 50, and that's including their home value. So if we want to look at millionaires excluding home value, looking only at investable assets, that threshold is actually crossed later, closer to the 60-year-old mark. Another respondent said, 150,000 plus bonus is when I maxed it out. Now that's a darn good income. And if we're looking at the numbers for this year, if they're maxing out that account and just looking at their salary, not including the bonuses, their savings rate is about 15%. And that's right where most financial professionals recommend that people be. $80,000 a year at 25. It helped that I was living together with my fiance. I think this one highlights a very important point. Yes, $80,000 is a good income, but having a partner who's aligned with your same goals and they're on the same page for saving and investing and building a brighter financial future, if you both are working towards that same goal, it's more likely to happen at a quicker rate. It's easier to hit this goal when you have two people working towards it rather than going at this goal separately. Simply from the fact that when two people live together, generally their expenses are lower. And if you have two people aggressively working towards this same goal, you're probably going to get there sooner. So make sure you choose your partner in life wisely. The $100,000 annual income mark seems to be a common answer for when people tend to max out this account. And again, that does put you in a very good savings rate, putting you above 20%. But make no mistake about it, it still requires an incredible amount of commitment to max out this account with a $100,000 income. Consider that almost 50% of six-figure earners report living paycheck to paycheck. So simply making a $100,000 income doesn't automatically mean you're going to be maxing out this account. You still have to be diligent. You have to be an active participant in your saving and investing journey in order to hit this threshold. But most people don't. Most people live for today and simply spend what they make. Others say they weren't able to max it out until hitting a $200,000 income mark. And make no mistake about it, a $200,000 income is a wildly impressive income. But if you read through a lot of these answers, you can see that there's a lot of super savers who are able to max out these accounts, even prior to having a six-figure income. A lot of people attribute it to having a partner who was on the same page financially, or they say they were able to do it because they didn't have children yet at that phase of life. And these two things can absolutely make it much easier to hit that target. I think it was also surprising to see that a lot of people in their late 20s or their mid 30s were able to max out these accounts. Those are still quite young ages. And it might speak to the audience that you're going to find on this type of Reddit feed. It's already people who are interested in saving and investing. I think this can be rather encouraging because if your goal is to max out this account, I absolutely believe you can get there. Yes, it's going to be easier if you have a higher income, and it's going to be easier if you have a partner who's on the same page financially and working towards this goal. And a big portion of it comes down to keeping your cost of living in check. This is going to look at what kind of house you live in, the car you drive, and your family dynamics, likely a mixture of all of these. But a good general rule of thumb is to start investing as soon as you possibly can, whatever amount you can, and then over time gradually increase your contributions. Let's say you're starting with a 5% savings rate. Well, you're not going to jump to maxing out your account overnight. You would just gradually increase it over time and eventually you'll get there. But what about the typical worker? How much is the typical worker contributing towards these employer-sponsored retirement plans? Well, according to Vanguard's report, How America Saves, the average worker is putting away 6.4% of their pay into this account. But once you factor in employer matching contributions, that brings up the typical worker's savings rate to 10.6%. And these savings rates are largely influenced by your age, how long you've been with a job, and your income. Older workers tend to save a higher percentage. Same with workers who have higher incomes or workers who have been at a job longer. And all of this makes sense because as you get older or grow in your career, generally your income tends to increase. And it's easier to save a bigger percentage of your income as your income increases. When we break things down by age, it's not surprising to see that younger workers have lower contribution rates. They tend to have lower salaries, whereas older workers tend to have higher salaries and higher contribution rates. Those in their late 20s and their early 30s tend to have contribution rates that are around 5 or 6% of their pay. This doesn't include the employer match. Then when you get to those who are in their 50s or 60s, their contribution rates look closer to 8 or 9%. Now, I still think we can do better than these savings rates. I'm not really concerned with what people start out with as a savings rate. I just think when you get started in a career, the most important thing you do is that you get started saving and you get started investing. But over time, you should be working to increase that percentage. And yes, we do see that trend of an increasing percentage, but it's roughly at about a rate of 1% per decade. And I think we can do better than that if we want to hit financial goals. I think a better trajectory would be to increase your savings rate at, say, 1% per year, or anytime you get an increase in pay, make sure you bump up your contribution rate. You want to do this until you hit that savings rate of 15 or 20%, because once you get to that sweet spot, most people are going to be on track to hit their financial goals. Now, of course, what your goals are personal to you, so you want to make sure you want to figure out what your ideal savings rate is for your goals. Again, if we break things down by income, it's not surprising to see that those with a higher income tend to have higher savings rates. For workers making about $50,000 a year or less, on average, they're typically contributing about 5% to their 401k account. Then when we look at workers making anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 a year, their contribution rate looks more like 8%. It's not until we pass that six-figure income mark that workers are contributing about 9% of their pay to their 401k. And finally, the longer a worker is with a company or with a job, they tend to contribute a higher amount to this employer-sponsored retirement plan. Workers who are just starting out with a company tend to contribute about 5% of their pay to this employer-sponsored retirement plan. But once they've been with a company for around a decade or so, that contribution rate works its way up to about 9%. And again, this really comes down to the fact that when you've been with a company longer, you've probably grown in your career field, you've probably had a few pay increases, expenses, and so it's easier to contribute a higher percentage to this account. Ultimately, I think a really good savings rate to aim for is 15 to 20% of your pay. And as I said, you don't have to start out saving that amount. Start out with whatever you can and grow it over time. But if you can try to hit a benchmark like this, it's going to put you more on track to hit your financial goals. If your savings rate is too low throughout your working years, it could derail your retirement. Maybe you end up having to play the catch-up game as you get close to retirement and in those final few years have to save really aggressively. Or maybe you have to work longer than anticipated to make sure you can retire with enough in your investments. Or you run the very real risk of retiring and then having to live a more frugal lifestyle than you originally planned or hoped for, or in the worst case scenario, running out of money in retirement and then having to re-enter the workforce. So what is your current savings rate? Are you aiming to max out these accounts? If you did, let me know what age you were able to hit that by or what income made that possible in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye.